So we know we go live because I get to see everything on my screen. So
Gotcha.
I'm Michael Smith of Teach Construction, and we're here with another in our series of Green Job Career Conversations. And this is in partnership with WorkNow. You'll see up on the graphic above me also says WorkNow Learn, but the WorkNow program has an online learning management system that all the members of WorkNow can really take some time and learn a bit about jobs in construction, about specific trade skills, learn about solar, stormwater, learn about energy efficiency, all sorts of different careers in construction, but more specifically those that are in green construction. And one of those we're going to talk about today. And I've got some gentlemen with me, both Bill and Eddie, and we're going to talk about stormwater, which, when I really first thought about it, stormwater didn't seem like a green job, but it really is. I mean, if you think about green jobs of just trying to say it's in construction, but they're either protecting natural resources or protecting the resources we have, I would argue, and I think you're going to explain a little bit to us, but stormwater certainly is a way to protect that asset that we already have in construction. So first of all, I want to do is, can you guys introduce yourself?
Bill, I'm Bill Robinson, owner of Stormwater, SRM Holdings, and we've got 20 years. We've been in business since 2004, and we really got started in the business focusing on the general construction industry because that's where I come from. But there was a need for general contractors to comply with new regulatory requirements that required that they keep all of their pollutants on site at all times. And so I got wrapped up in that early on and started a company to help general contractors. I was 25 years into the industry already. And so that's what we do. We help GCs comply with the regulatory requirements. And we have a software program that helps them do that. We have an environmental management system focused on stormwater that helps them do that. And then we go out more recently, we have a construction company that goes out and helps them in the field. And that's what we do. We help.
And that construction company is the Stormwater Logistics Division.
Correct.
Which brings us right to you, Eddie.
Yep. So I'm Ed Schneider. I'm a project manager with Stormwater Logistics. And so what we do is all the stuff dealing with stormwater in the field, whether that's, control measure installation or be that routine maintenance on job sites. The idea is that we're there as a sub to the client to help them out with their stormwater management.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about stormwater management. I'm a construction company. Why do
you care? So So back in the 70s, with the Clean Water Act, the federal government designated dirt as a pollutant. So you might not think of dirt as a pollutant, seeing it all over the place. But from the perspective of a job site, they're going to say all that disturbed soil is a potential pollutant if it were to leave the job site. It's okay where it's at on the job site, but once it leaves and ends up in a stream or a creek or something of that nature, now it's a pollutant. And so you on the job site are required to keep that pollutant within the bounds of your construction. And so there's a number of ways to do that, whether that be perimeter controls, which are physical controls that you might see black fencing along the outside of a job site. We call that silt fence. The idea there is that water running off the job site runs into that silt fence. It slows down. The sand drops down to the inside of the silt fence, and then clean water comes out the other side. Or if anything, it just kind of holds that water there so the heavier sand particles can fall out and water makes its way
just
through.
To slow down the water a lot of times.
Yeah. The idea is it might be a filter, or it might just be a mechanism of slowing that water down. You might also see perimeter ditches, which convey this water around the perimeter to a sediment basin, which would just be essentially a large dug pit, of earth and material where that stormwater collects into that pit, and then you have the sand settle out. And then the idea is that the cleaner water is discharged out of that pit.
That's pretty cool. Now, we're talking, before I really spend a little bit of time with you guys and coming out to the job site, which thanks for having me out. And we're right now in a worksite trailer, a construction trailer on a pretty large project. Can't catch it on the camera, but there's a map on the wall that you were showing me about how big is this site?
Roughly 1,300 acres. Yeah.
Ouch.
And
That's a lot of space to worry about.
Keeps growing. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, so around this 1,300 acres, you have to protect the whole thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So anywhere where there's, stormwater could run off a slope into a non-permitted area, that's where you have to have some sort of perimeter control to stop that flow and filter out the sand or dirt before it runs off site. So you're not just dumping a bunch of dirt into the field next to you. Although that might not register as an issue to someone who's like, well, that's a construction site, that's a farm field. Why do I care if there's dirt from this job site in this farm field? Well, that might not seem as an issue to you, but from the regulatory side of things, that's a fairly serious issue. So the construction site is held liable for maintaining that, keeping everything within that job site.
Well, I imagine if you got creeks or a stream running through, last thing you need is all that material, which now I learned that's considered a pollutant according to the regulatory process. You don't need it just dumping right in the stream and going downstream.
Right. And the other way that pollutant may leave the job site is being tracked out by muddy tires on vehicles or equipment as they leave and run down the roadway. That's also considered a violation. So what we do have is these things, there's several forms of them, but we call them vehicle tracking controls at the access point. So when a piece of equipment or truck leaves the job site, the idea is that this tracking control scours the tires on that vehicle and drops some mud down into the tracking control that needs to be maintained. And you might see that as rock at the beginning of a job site, whether it's 3 to 6 inch rock. You might see different yellow tracking pads or black tracking pads of different materials. And then if it does track off the job site, we're required to go sweep that up and clean it.
So that's what I pulled into the job site this morning.
Yeah, that's what you came
I was
over.
driving my truck because it was a real bumpy surface.
Yeah, they're not fun to go over at all.
Right. Take some time. Yeah.
They're not good for walking on either. Kind of an anti-safety device, but
So with all this work, they've got to not only identify where you have to put these control mechanisms in, then put them in, and then it sounds like there's a lot of maintenance. So is that really kind of a larger portion of what your guys do in a given day?
It is, yeah. And in a given day, there's usually 1 or 2 things you're going to be doing. That's either installing these control measures or performing maintenance on these control measures. So on the install, we might be using equipment like a skid steer to help us out, depending on the accessibility of this job site. We will be installing these perimeter control measures. And then if you're performing maintenance that day, what you would be doing is doing an inspection on a job site, identifying areas where these control measures may require maintenance, such as dragging the sediment back from the silt fence. And so you would be on a crew, and what you would be doing is checking all these control measures, making sure they're in okay shape, and if not, you're making repairs to them.
So I imagine sometimes I'm in there with a shovel or maybe using a small piece of equipment, not like using a big earth mover to deal with a lot of that.
Yeah, wouldn't be using an earth mover. We would be using a skid more or less for the larger issues.
Okay.
But most often than not, you can be using a shovel, a power broom, which is essentially a broom head on the attached to a weed whacker, which are pretty useful. You might be using a leaf blower to kind of clean up areas and make them look nicer. Or you might be using a mechanized sweeper, such as the Bros broom, or a sweeper attachment on your skid to clean the dirt off the roads.
So I can't work for you. You're not just putting me on a shovel every day.
No.
I got some other equipment to use.
Yeah, there's plenty of equipment that we use, but yeah, and a good bit of shovel time and sledgehammer time when we're hammering stakes for installs.
Right.
we may put you on a computer because a good share of our job is record keeping and documenting.
I just leaned over because I realized I didn't turn on Bill's microphone at first. So
I was talking through Eddie's.
yeah,
Oh,
a lot of times we'll pick each other up. So you were bringing up though document management or tracking everything. Can you talk to me about that?
The permit. So you apply for a permit, which seems counterintuitive. That you're actually applying for a permit to discharge pollutants off of your site. And with that permit comes a whole set of regulations that say, yes, you can discharge pollutants off your site under these conditions. And those conditions are kind of subjective. They're left to interpretation, and nobody really knows what the quantity of pollutant is that you're allowed. So because it's so subjective, basically 0 is the number that you're shooting for. And dirt, as sediment, as Eddie mentioned, is the number one thing that regulators are looking for, mostly because it's also a great indicator of other pollutants that you're allowing to leave the site. So oil, trash, anything that doesn't belong in the water, which is just about everything, is also considered a pollutant. So the regulations are set up, and we track, using our software and other tools, we track on a weekly basis. We have to account for, the condition of our control measures to make sure that they're operating, and we have to basically prove that they're operating as effectively as they possibly can. So half of our job is going out and inspecting these controls and documenting, just in case, a regulator shows up. We have to be able to provide them evidence that we inspected those control measures every week, and that we maintain them in good operating conditions. So half of the job is with the computer out in the field, and the other half is, following right up behind, because you basically, once you find a problem, it's incumbent upon you to correct it immediately.
Right.
So you have 0 time to correct them. So it's an ongoing. We are the first people on the job site, no matter what. Construction cannot start until we show up and put the controls in. And then we're there during the whole duration, and we're always the last person to leave the job, because the last thing you do is stabilize all of the exposed soils on the site and get the site into final operating condition as it was originally envisioned. So we're there from weeks before the job starts, and then we're there in some cases 6 months after the job is ended until the grass grows, and we're there to maintain all that
nature
stuff.
take over its own erosion controls.
Yeah. And so there isn't a single project that can't. The beauty of our job is the job security, because there's not a job in the state of Colorado that's over, an acre,
right,
that doesn't require stormwater controls on it. And so nothing happens without following this regulation.
So it's simple, right? Since the 70s, you just had to take a 1,300 acre site like we're on now and make sure that every piece of dirt that was here when you started didn't leave.
Correct.
Yeah, that sounds like an easy job.
Yeah.
So to
No
do
problem.
that, you've got software, you're tracking all of it. Obviously, you're
Right.
making plans to install this ahead of time, get those plans approved, and then follow through with your plan and document that you did it.
Right.
Around 1,300 acres. Now, obviously, the whole site's not being developed right now. It's a residential site. Usually gets done in chunks. As more houses are built, they move into more area. But you're still responsible for the whole area. You get a small army out here working with you?
Pretty much, yeah.
So what's a person do? What do you even call someone that's maintaining this site?
They're called technicians. And so if they were to perform maintenance, they'd be on a crew that day, and they'd be checking out our project areas, going along with someone who's inspecting, whether that inspector is a foreman or a technician at that time. And they will be following them around, identifying issues and cleaning things up. So for example, you might have what we call rock socks in the curb line on the roadway. And
Okay, before we go too far, rock sock, is it what it sounds like?
pretty much,
It's just
yeah.
like
Think
a
about
sock with big rocks in it?
chicken wire around some 3/4 inch rock or
Okay.
1.5 inch rock.
Okay.
And the idea there is that water flowing down a flow line coming off a disturbed area will have sediment in it, and this rock sock slows that flow down and lets the sand drop out. So as a technician performing maintenance, you're checking out these rock socks in the flow lines, and you're cleaning and picking up the dirt that's accumulated behind it. So now it has full capacity yet again, because if you don't clean it out, then your capacity dwindles to nothing essentially.
Well, I love the job security, as you mentioned, because basically I'm going to find my rock sock, find the soil that it stopped because it did its job, and now move that back into the construction site. So the next time it rains, it can happen again.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Just
Okay.
again and again. It's very repetitive. Yeah. Yeah. Another thing you do a lot is just sweeping the roadways, because as people come on and off disturbed areas, you're going to have a lot of tracking. And that might not all be off-site. A lot of that stuff is inside a subdivision that might be all permitted under the same area, but you still have to clean those roadways.
Okay.
So as equipment moves across the curb, we're going to be behind and sweeping things up.
So as a tech, I could be using a shovel, like we're using a broom, we're using maybe a skid steer if I've been trained and rated to use that. Power brooms that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Mini excavator.
Those are my favorite piece of equipment.
Yeah,
I love a little
that,
mini
yeah.
excavator.
Yeah. So some of our larger control measures out here could be a check dam, as tall as this desk and 15 feet wide, and especially after these recent, record rainfall amounts in Colorado, we have a mini X that goes out and reaches out and pulls the sediment from behind that rock check dam and dumps it into our dump truck. And so we have CDL drivers that we need lots of that operate the trucks, because they have to meet certain DOT requirements. And so, there's a whole, from the technician up to the foreman, those would make up our crews. But then we also have equipment, maintenance folks and drivers and, so the whole, anything you find in a construction company, we just don't happen to build anything permanent. Everything we do is temporary controls, and they all have to be removed. So all the miles of, controls that we put in out here, at some point when the job is done, you can't claim it's done until all the temporary controls are removed, because why would you need a temporary control if everything's stabilized? Right. So we have to come back in and then remove everything that we installed in the first place and maintained for 2 years or a year. It's been 5 years out here. So, and it's just, this is
maybe a third developed at this site.
Oh, no, it's 30,000 acres of future development. And I think we're 1,300 into it now.
Oh, okay. So you're going to be out here for a while.
We hope to be, depends on what kind of job we do. So if we, and it's always balancing the cost, so we have estimators and we have obviously an IT department that developed the software and has to maintain that. And so it's, from technician all the way up to estimator, we have.
So that brings up two questions for me. One, I want to say to anybody that's listening, if you're listening to this live, if you have any questions, put it right in the chat, regardless of what platform you're on. We'll see it, or I'll see it come in. That's why I'm looking off screen every time. But if you're watching this after today and you're watching on a recording and you have questions, post them down below, because we do check those questions and we'll get back to folks. It also helps us out for future conversations of what kind of questions we should have. But the question I do have, so we started talking about a maintenance tech or a stormwater tech, right? But you had mentioned a lot of other jobs. So you had estimators, you mentioned crew foremen, you've got CDL drivers. What's the typical promotion pathway? If I started working for a company on a stormwater maintenance crew or a tech crew, what could I go from there?
Well, you'd start out as a technician, and you'd be on a crew, and you'll be led by a foreman or a lead tech who might be training to become a foreman. And so as a technician, you're just out there, you got to be a sponge. You just have to absorb everything, learn everything from equipment operation to what we're doing, why we're doing it. Learning about inspections, learning how to use our software so you can perform inspections, with the idea being that you will equip yourself to be a foreman if you show leadership skills. But with that, being a foreman, you're also required to have a CDL, because we have a lot of jobs off-site. And so to get equipment off-site, you need to be driving a trailer that's hauling equipment or material. And then from there, you could, after being a foreman, you could look into being a project manager, or you could run a yard or something of that nature, or one day become a superintendent or an estimator. Once you reach that level, it's kind of where do you want to go? You've gotten this far.
So it's certainly not that you're looking just for techs to start working with you and stay there. I mean, if I wanted to always be out in the sun and the enjoyable weather and work with machinery or so, I could do that.
Right.
If I wanted more, it sounds like you've got a lot of pathways.
Yeah, the more people in management that have been on the ground and understand what we actually do, the better. So the idea is that these guys would move through and progress to a point of management.
And that's what we're always seeking is, somebody that has any leadership ability or can run a crew. I mean, I suppose any employer is that way. We're always looking for that person that has any kind of spark of leadership or desire to move, advance. There's, endless amounts to learn. I mean, the regulations are 67 pages long. And so figuring out, and then every single municipality you go into has a different set of regs. So we have to balance the local regulations with the state and with the federal regs. And they're, it's a lot. 20 years and I still haven't learned everything there is to know
You didn't
about.
get to page 67 yet?
I've been through that 100 times and I still, everybody's interpretation could be slightly different. So you have to know your regulator locally. So if you have good personality skills, look at Ed. He started with us 3 years ago, and as a technician, of course, he came with, municipal experience prior to that. So within 3 years, he's running a 1,300 acre, monster job, very complex, and keeping the owner happy. And they love what we're doing out here. So we hope to be out here for 30 years. That would be great. I'll be dead by then, but
perfect. I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's a perfect tee up, though. You've been with the company now for 3 years.
Sure.
Why? How?
Why and how?
How did it work?
Well, I started out in New Orleans working for the sewer and water municipality down there. And down there, I was on the regulatory side of things. So I was the city inspector who'd come and inspect the job site for the permit that we had with the state. So the state requires that these municipalities who operate these drainage systems enforce the regulations that trickle down from the federal government. And so I'd come on the job site, make sure they had their control measures, make sure they were maintained. And if not, then we'd have to escalate enforcement to make sure that was performed.
So then you decided to switch to the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, the regulatory side is it's a tough job because nobody wants to see you, and you're never welcome, and you never bring good news. And so it can be a tedious job to be in the regulatory side. But as far as opportunity and advancement, I mean, the regulations are going nowhere except more stringent. So it's the cumulative effect of all these job sites across America and every municipality that allows stormwater to hit their streets and run off into the storm sewer. All of that ends up in our streams and rivers. And the cumulative effect of it is, the Clean Water Act addressed industrial discharges back in the 70s, and that was the biggest concern, all the chemicals and, power plants dumping who knows what into the water system, and it was affecting people's health pretty significantly. You couldn't find clean water in the U.S., 40, 50 years ago because of the Industrial Revolution. And this cumulative effect, they had to make a regulation that would break it down into areas of responsibility. So you had your boundaries, and it was basically the job site boundary. Whatever you permitted, you were responsible for. So if you allowed anything to leave your site, it seems like a ridiculous, what could my little 7-Eleven on the corner actually be doing to harm the environment? Mm-hmm. Well, the regulations don't care. It's the only way we can get our arms around all this is to enforce equally on a 1,300 acre site or a 2-acre site on the corner of a strip center,
Sure.
So that's.
We've got a question that came in from Rich that said, read it here. What kind of training is needed to enter stormwater management field? It's like a 2-part. And what would be an entry-level position to shoot for? So let's start with the entry-level position first. That's really the stormwater tech that we were talking about, right?
Yep. You would come in as a tech 1, and you can come in with no experience at all, just a good attitude. Ready to work and show up for work, and we will provide training for you in this field. Or if you have training from outside the company prior to joining our company, then we'd probably throw you up the ladder a little further. But there are training requirements for being an inspector. Those are ones that you guys would help with too. Yeah, we'll provide those.
Okay. Yeah. So we provide an all-day basic training that covers the fundamentals of the reason why we're out here. Helps explain that, and then there's an advanced training that gets into the software side of it. And so all of our just about all of our techs, if you're going to become a foreman, we'll put you through the basic and the advanced training. Every Friday, we go through on-the-job training out here for 2 hours every Friday, involving some of our auditors and perhaps myself or whoever. And we cover other fundamentals. We do equipment training. So if you're going to operate a skid steer, you'll be trained in the operation and maintenance of a skid steer and a mini excavator and a hydro mulching machine and you name it. So there's just,
For some of that smaller equipment, I don't have to have a CDL for a mini skid or for a mini X or a skid steer. So just if I'm doing over the road work.
Right. So if you enter any public road, you have to, and you're over a certain weight limit, which just about every piece of our equipment puts you over that limit. Then you must have a CDL. And so that's why foremen need to have a CDL. And so we'll put you through the CDL training, which is not inexpensive and it's a great skill to have. But we, for those that are showing some promise in leadership, we put them through a CDL training and get them certified so that they can drive our equipment around. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
So let me make sure I got all the questions here so far. And if anybody else has any questions, please type them on. We've got another 4 or 5 minutes to have conversation. So it looks like Rich also is there right on the screen. Says, is there a stormwater certification that's needed to work on any CDOT projects? So does working for CDOT, for those who don't know, it's our transportation department for the state of Colorado. So does CDOT have different regulations than a residential construction development like we're on right now?
They don't have a different regulation. They're following the same regs, but they have their own program. And so, you have to have a TECS certification, which a number of our employees do. I'm due to renew mine here by the middle of July, so I don't have to go through the whole course all over again. But yes, they have their own set of requirements. Most municipalities may have their own set of regs, but they don't require a specific training, but CDOT does. So, and many transportation districts do. So yes, we'll put you through the TECS training. We presently don't have any CDOT jobs. We have a lot of clients that are doing them, but they do it all in-house. So that's another point also. Every single general contractor that builds anything in the state is required to have their own program. They can use us, which many choose to do. They'll just defer to us and hire us as their program. Others choose to do it in-house. And so a lot of the folks that we train end up, getting a sweet job offer from a general contractor who we're working with, and they just move over to the GC and, start working for the GC as their stormwater lead for the company. And so then there's opportunity to move sideways, up, down, but everybody has to do this. So, and the last person you want to lose on your project is the stormwater person, because they have been keeping all the records for the duration of the job. So as far as job security goes, having the skill of, stormwater lead for the project is another job security option, because you just don't want to lose your stormwater guy.
Sure.
So
it sounds like, as a recap, you could have someone come work, and I put on the screen your website for your stormwater logistics site and /careers, I think, because there's any open positions. You train. I just have to be able to get out here, I'm imagining, right? Get here and be willing to work and willing to show up every day, look at his mug and do what he tells me to do.
That's right. Yes. It's all about just basic work skills. Can you show up to work on time? You have reliable transportation to get, those are our two minimum requirements. Is you just have to have reliable transportation and a good attitude. And that's about it. Other than that, the rest takes care of itself. You'll start to see what others are doing. You spend a couple of weeks, if you're smart and ambitious, we'll pick up on that very quickly, because we are always seeking smart, ambitious human beings that are willing to put in a day's work, and it pays significantly better than many jobs. So
Well,
it's
getting good paycheck. I got to show up. Again, we have to deal with Eddie, but or some of the other crews. But training and opportunities for advancement.
Yep.
Sounds to me like checks every box that I'm looking for when I'm looking for a new pathway.
Yeah.
Is only young people that you're taking? Is it second career, third career? Oh, you're all open for that? As long as I could physically do the job, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think the physical side of it is a little bit, as far as, if you've got estimating background, in general construction, this is just a smaller piece of the whole general construction pie. Usually you have electrical estimators, mechanical estimators. Dirt work estimators. We would be you'd just be focused on stormwater controls.
Oh, so you might have a lateral move from somebody else who's been doing estimating in some other field within construction.
Right. Yep. So that's typically, an upper man, but we definitely desire folks, that have been through the ranks and understand the infield, nuts and bolts of putting this stuff in and how long it takes. And obviously, to be a good estimator, you need to have that information or know where to acquire it. So
right.
Practical experience is invaluable. So
now, obviously, it changes, but are you comfortable sharing what starting wages are for a maintenance person or maintenance tech, rather?
Well, presently it's roughly $22 an hour, which is, pretty decent.
Yeah.
It's, and then most of I think we're averaging $24 an hour as a company, so foreman, obviously.
You're making more as I go up the ladder.
If you have a CDL and you're foreman leadership quality, then you could be starting out at $30 an hour. So it's a living wage, that's for sure.
Certainly.
So
certainly,
especially if you're living in your mom's basement.
I wish I still was. I don't understand this whole reason why I wanted to get out of the house at 18.
Yeah.
I've spent the last 30 years trying to get back in.
Yeah. So it's you can make a living at it, and of course during the summer months we work year round, so it's not a seasonal job for us. Many companies are seasonal, but for us it's year round, and for the next 4 or 5 months, as much overtime as you can absorb, which is time and a half, then we would probably have enough work to keep you busy doing overtime. So it's voluntary, but most of the time.
Right.
So it's yes, you can do significantly better than.
Doesn't sound like a bad thing to me.
No.
Eddie, any closing thoughts? Anybody who might be interested in?
I would just say come out with a good attitude. If you're interested in checking it out. If it's not for you, it's not for you. Not going to force it upon you. But just if it's something you want to check out, just feel free. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate both of you guys for spending a little bit of time with me. Those of you who have been watching, if you have a quick closing question, I see it on my screen. Otherwise, do put questions on these. I don't care when it is, tomorrow, next month, next year, and have questions about this type of work. If I don't have the answer for you, certainly we'll get the answer for you. The other thing is, if you're interested in jobs in construction, the program WORKNOW, which is sponsoring these video series, is there to support you. So not only can you find great employers where you can come work, where you're going to get a good starting wage and go up from there, but WORKNOW is there to support you in other things you might need, whether it be transportation, whether it be either other educational aspects, or just some coaching. A lot of us trying to entering into a new career, there's a lot of unknowns. So somebody else to kind of have your back is a great opportunity. So that's what WORKNOW is for, to get you into construction and to support you staying in construction. Because the last thing we want to do is help attract people to come out to show up for the first day, the first week, and then they disappear.
Right.
What we need is people coming in this industry and staying in this industry and working with some great companies like yourselves to hopefully stay in this industry.
I don't think AI can take this job.
That's the perfectly said. There's a lot of jobs that can be outsourced either digitally or to some other place overseas or so. And this is the one career path that will always be here.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in it, please reach out to WORKNOW. You can go on to worknowlearn.org to find out more information about, I'll put it on the screen here. There we go. I think it's that one. You can go there and watch some videos. In fact, Eddie has agreed we're going to do a follow-up video to this where we're going to go out in the field and look at some of that stuff. So we'll compile that up, show you what tech is doing in stormwater, and that'll be kind of fun. So hopefully there's a mini X out there somewhere.
Sure.
So, again, we're a little bit over time, so thanks for everybody that was watching, and do send those questions in. And gentlemen, again, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.